The silence. That is what the survivors remembered most. Not the roar of the wind, or the crash of timber, but the heavy, suffocating silence that hung over the Ionian Sea on the morning of September 2, 31 BC. The water was calm, but the air was thick with the scent of impending doom. On one side, the massive, towering galleys of the east, dripping with gold and hubris. On the other, the agile, hungry fleet of the west, cold and disciplined like the steel of a gladius. This was not just a battle for a patch of water. This was not a dispute over borders or trade routes. This was the final, bloody convulsion of a civil war that had torn the civilized world apart for decades. Two men stood at the precipice of history, looking across the waves at one another. One would become a god. The other would become a memory. This is the story of ambition. Of love that destroyed empires. Of a betrayal so profound it echoes through 2,000 years of history. Welcome to Actium. Welcome to the day the Roman Republic died. To understand why thousands of men were about to die in these waters, we have to look back. We have to look at the two titans holding the world by the throat. On one side, we have Mark Antony, the Colossus, the last great general of the old era. He was a man of appetites, a warrior who lived loudly, loved fiercely, and fought with the brute strength of a lion. He held the East. He held the wealth of Egypt. And, most dangerously, he held the heart of Cleopatra, the last pharaoh. Opposite him stood Octavian, the boy, the heir of Julius Caesar. He was sickly, physically unimposing, and not much of a soldier. But Octavian possessed a weapon far more dangerous than a sword, a mind like a steel trap. While Antony threw feasts in Alexandria, Octavian sat in Rome, whispering poison into the ears of the Senate. He told them Antony was gone. He told them the great Roman hero had been seduced by a foreign witch. He told them Antony intended to move the capital of the empire to Egypt, to turn free Romans into slaves of a queen. It was a masterclass in propaganda. And it worked. The Senate didn't declare war on Antony, that would be civil war. No, they declared war on Cleopatra. But everyone knew who the real target was. And so, the world was split in two. The East against the West. The past against the future. But by the time the fleets met at Actium, the battle had arguably already been lost. Not by swords, but by starvation. Antony had made a fatal mistake. He had brought his massive fleet into the Ambracian Gulf and waited. He waited for the winter to pass, basking in his own perceived invincibility. But outside the Gulf, a predator was lurking. Marcus Agrippa, Octavian's brilliant admiral, had sealed the trap. Agrippa cut the supply lines. He choked the trade routes. For months, Antony's army sat in the swamps, eating rotten grain and drinking stagnant water. Malaria tore through the camp like wildfire. The great crews of Antony's ships, the muscle that powered his war machine, began to die. Every morning, hundreds of bodies were tossed into the mud. Those who didn't die, deserted. They slipped away in the night, choosing the uncertainty of the wild over the certainty of death in Antony's camp. By the day of the battle, Antony's magnificent ships were undermanned. They were hollow giants. Skeletons commanded by ghosts. Antony had two choices left: surrender and face execution, or fight his way out. He chose to fight. But this was not a strategy of conquest. It was a strategy of escape. The sun reached its zenith. The wind shifted. The signal flags snapped in the breeze. The waiting was over. Antony's fleet moved first. And what a sight it must have been. His flagship was a monster, a Quinquereme of such size that its deck was a fortress wall, towering over the water. His ships were armored with thick belts of bronze and iron, designed to smash through anything in their path. They were the elephants of the sea. Against them, Octavian's fleet looked almost pathetic. His ships, the Liburnians, were small, low to the water, and lacked the crushing power of the enemy. But they had something else. They had speed. And they had the open sea. The crash came. But it wasn't the head-on collision Antony wanted. As his lumbering giants pushed forward, Octavian's ships danced away. They refused to engage directly. Instead, they swarmed. Like a pack of wolves attacking a dying buffalo, the small Roman ships circled the Egyptian behemoths. They darted in, shattered the banks of oars, and darted out before the heavy grappling hooks could come down. Arrows darkened the sky. Ballista bolts, thick as a man's arm, smashed into hulls, sending splinters of wood flying like shrapnel. The screams of the dying mixed with the rhythmic, terrifying beat of the drums below deck. It was a stalemate. Antony's ships were too strong to be sunk, but too slow to catch their tormentors. Octavian's ships were too fast to be caught, but too light to deliver a killing blow. The sea churned with blood and debris, the battle turning into a grinding, slow-motion meat grinder. And then, it happened. The moment that would stain Mark Antony's legacy forever. In the center of the chaos, a gap opened in the formation. It was a mistake, a momentary lapse in discipline. But Cleopatra saw it. From her royal barge, amidst the smoke and the screams, the Queen of Egypt made her move. Suddenly, the purple sails of her 60 distinct warships unfurled. They caught the wind with a crack like thunder. But they didn't turn to attack Octavian. They didn't turn to help Antony. They turned south. Thousands of men stopped fighting to watch in disbelief. The Egyptian fleet was running. They were abandoning the battle, cutting through the water, leaving their allies to die. Mark Antony, standing on the deck of his flagship, watched the purple sails recede toward the horizon. He looked at his men, men who had bled for him, men who were currently dying for him. And in that split second, the great general broke. He didn't rally his troops. He didn't stay to die with honor. Mark Antony jumped into a small, fast galley, and he chased after her. He chased after his lover, leaving his army, his navy, and his honor burning in the water behind him. It was the ultimate betrayal. When the soldiers realized their commander had fled, the will to fight evaporated. But they couldn't run. They were trapped in their heavy armor, on their heavy ships. That is when Agrippa gave the order that turned a defeat into a massacre. Fire. Octavian's archers dipped their arrows in pitch. Catapults were loaded with pots of burning oil and charcoal. The sky turned from a hail of iron to a rain of fire. Antony's ships, dry from the long summer, became floating infernos. The screams changed now. It was no longer the cry of battle, but the shrieks of men being cooked alive inside their bronze armor. The water offered no escape, the oil slicked the surface, burning even on the waves. The pride of the Eastern Fleet was reduced to ash and driftwood. By nightfall, the sea was illuminated by the eerie glow of hundreds of burning pyres. The silence returned, but this time, it was the silence of the grave. The aftermath was inevitable. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt, living on borrowed time. A year later, as Octavian's legions marched into Alexandria, they took their own lives. A Roman sword for the general. A venomous asp for the queen. A tragic, poetic end to a story written in blood. But the real winner wasn't death. It was Octavian. He returned to Rome not as a conqueror, but as a savior. He closed the doors of the Temple of Janus, signifying peace for the first time in generations. He took the name Augustus. He became the first emperor. On the ashes of Actium, the chaotic, messy, democratic Roman Republic was buried. And in its place, the Roman Empire rose, cold, efficient, and eternal. Actium was a battle of blunders, of sickness, and of cowardice. It was not a glorious fight. But as you look at the map of the modern world, remember this: the Western world as we know it was forged on that burning sea, on a September afternoon, when a boy defeated a giant, and a republic became an empire. The Roman Republic may have fallen, but the pages of history are far from closed. Every week, We dive deep into the most pivotal, bloody, and brilliant moments of warfare that shaped our world, recreated in the style you saw today. If you want to witness the clash of empires and the strategies of legends, strike that subscribe button and ring the bell to join our ranks. And tell me in the comments below, was Mark Antony a traitor who deserved his fate, or a man who simply chose love over power? I'll see you in the next battle.